I'm going to be making one of my favorite quilts from start to finish. I would love it if you would sew along with me. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe, and today I get to sew and quilt just like you. I'm so excited. I am going to be using a pattern from our Pretty Darn Quick book, and I am going to be making It's a Snap. Now, I love It's a Snap because it has all this wonderful cascading movement, and it's a super simple block. You're going to see how easy it is to put together in just a moment. Now, let me show you also gorgeous fabrics that we're going to be using. Love this 4th of July kind of feel on this fabric. All the nice fireworks, lots of contrast, lots of fun. Now we're going to be showing you how to purchase this fabric in a little bit, so be sure and keep watching. Now let's get quilting. To keep all my pieces organized when I'm working on a project, I make labels with a brief description of what I'm cutting. Then I put the cut pieces and their label into a Ziploc bag. I like to make all my labels before I start cutting. This helps to streamline the process. When I make my first cut, I always leave a little extra so that I can straighten it up on the edge. So from fabric number 1, it has me cut one strip that I'm cutting some of my squares for the block D. But it also has me cut a border number 3 extension because I don't need the whole strip for block D. Now it has me cut border number 3 extension to 4 inches. I looked at the pattern, the remainder of that is not used anywhere else, so I'm not going to trim it down. Now be sure to always check your pattern before leaving it whole to make sure you're not using the remainder of that strip anywhere else. I think these fabrics are going to look great in this pattern because they have so much contrast. It's a Snap has a really fun, beautiful cascading effect that gives the quilt a lot of movement. But because of this cascading effect, all 3 fabrics touch each other. So we need to make sure that there's plenty of contrast. After I cut all of my pieces from a specific fabric position, if there's any extra left over, I'd be sure to hang on to it just in case I make any mistakes on cutting. Just a little tip when making the It's a Snap pattern. We do not recommend directional fabric. The reason for that is because the blocks are assembled and then rotated, and that would put your directional fabric going all different directions, so it's best just to choose a tossed. I love to chain stitch my pieces. You'll see this better in a minute whenever I make my blocks. I like to chain stitch them because it keeps them together whenever I'm sewing. You have no idea how often I've accidentally misplaced one of my pieces because it wasn't attached. I always press my seams open. To me, it makes it flatter and it's easier to put my blocks together. And there's no going back and pressing the other direction when I accidentally press the wrong way. So pressing them open is just simpler for me. I really like using best press on my seams. I think it gives it a lot more stability when I'm working with the fabric. When I do use best press, I turn the steam off on my iron. After I cut my units, I take the label from my original cutting of all the strips and pieces, I scratch out the old information, I flip the card over and write the new information on the card. So that way I can reuse the cards and still keep everything perfectly organized. Now before we get too far into making our quilt top, let's look at this fabric and get the kit information. So our focus fabric that we chose, which you've been seeing, it's gorgeous, is this wonderful blue with all the kind of bursts of fireworks, and I love it. It's got all the stars and all the bright bursts. It's just happy. It has good memories too, because I love 4th of July sitting on the grass watching the fireworks. This is going to go in our #1 position. That is where we're putting that, and that is this area here. Now our number 2 position is this great kind of tone-on-tone white. It has a little bitty star in it, which is perfect to go with all of the stars in our focus fabric. It is our background, so it gives us that blank space, that resting space for our eye. And then our number 3 fabric is this other great star. It's our red, and that's our pop. That is going to go everywhere you see the blue here and on the border. And I love this red because it's a tone on tone, but there's lots of different tones, so it keeps a lot of interest. So let's look at that kit information. It is 8023131. It is called Fired Up, and the pattern is It's a Snap from our Pretty Darn Quick book. Now let's get back to making our quilt. Now that I'm sewing my blocks together, I'll start pinning. I don't pin my strip assemblies because often the ends don't line up anyway, and they're going to get trimmed off. So not pinning those strips together saves me time. When I'm assembling blocks, I want them to be perfect, so I always pin them. Pinning keeps everything lined up and matching and saves time later in the process. Be careful not to sew over your pins though. It is very easy to break your needle that way or even dull it with a little chip. You can really see here how I chain piece my pieces together. Now that I'm ready to press, I just snip the threads between the blocks that have been chain pieced. Then they're ready to press. I really like the It's a Snap pattern because of the illusion that the blocks are stacked together, tumbling down the quilt. It's also a great project when you want something really interesting quickly. As you're making the quilt top, you don't really see all of that neat stacking of the blocks that it creates. And then you start sewing the rows together and the pattern really comes to life. It's so cool. Now I'm going to check my blocks and make sure they're all square. I want to make sure they're all perfectly even. Sometimes you trim and sometimes you don't need to, but I check them all just in case. I'm ready to start sewing my rows together. I like to lay out all my rows before I start sewing them to make sure I have all the blocks going the right direction. There's nothing more frustrating than sewing the row and finding out that one of your blocks is upside down. You can lay these out on a table, on the floor, your bed, whatever you have available. I put a sticky note on the book underneath the row I'm laying out. This helps me stay on track. I stack my blocks from left to right in the row so that I have one neat stack to take to the sewing machine. It's very important to press all your seams as you're going. I've learned that the pressing step is not just for pressing seams, but for checking my work. I check to make sure my block corners are matching and that I didn't accidentally sew that block upside down. Then when I'm done with that row, I move the sticky note to the next row. When I start sewing my rows together, I only sew a couple together at a time. So that gives me multiple rows of 2. And then I take my sets of 2, sew those together and make a row of 4, and then I sew my 2 4s together to make all 8. This helps to keep it from getting too bulky at the machine. I like using a seam ripper similar to a stiletto to help guide my fabric through the machine. It keeps my fingers out from the needle and it keeps my layers together nicely. When you start sewing your large sections of rows together, it's helpful to have some sort of table or extended sewing table beside your machine that you can put the bulk of the fabric on while you're sewing. This really helps to keep the weight of the quilt from pulling down the section you're working with. Now it's time for borders. I don't cut the selvages off of my border strips before I sew them together. I like to use those selvage edges as a guide and then sew 1/4 inch from that printed edge. On white fabric, it's a little hard to see the printed edge on the selvage. So I use those little dots where the fabric came off of the loom as a guide to sew my 1/4 inch. After sewing all the strips together, I trim the selvages off using the seam as my guide. After I've sewn my long border strip to one side of the quilt, I trim the end a little longer just using scissors. Now I'll trim this up cleaner with a rotary cutter later, but I do this so that I can sew both side borders on in one sitting. You'll see that in just a minute whenever I cut my final border. I always like to press my border strips after I've sewn them before I trim them because it gets them really nice and flat, and that way I can get a true measurement. With this red fabric here, you can see how I really use those selvage edges to line them up and sew my seam. So here I'm pressing my seams open, and then I carefully trim off the edge of the border with my rotary cutter. Now all of our borders are added and I think it looks great. Now it's time to do the binding. I like to do an economy binding, and I start sewing my strips together very similarly to the border strips, leaving that selvage on and doing my 1/4 inch. Normally I press my seams open on my binding strips before I start pressing my binding in half, but I'm pretty excited and I want to get this done. After I press the entire strip with those raw edges together, I go and fold one edge into the center and press it. Then I go back and fold that in half so that I have one raw edge showing and one folded edge. I always like to prepare my binding right away and not wait, because if I wait till after it comes back from long arm, oftentimes I don't feel like doing it, and I want to make sure I can get that binding on right away. Ta-da! We have it. It's a snap. And didn't it turn out fabulous? I just think it was so much fun putting together. I just love it. Now we're going to send it off to the long arm quilter, and then we are going to post some pictures on Instagram and Facebook of the finished quilt. So be sure and check that out on our social media there so that you can see the finished quilt. Now, do you have any final thoughts on this? Did you enjoy watching us make the It's a Snap pattern? Did you learn anything? What would you do different? I would love to hear. Put those in the comments. Now, also want to mention that, of course, we have the kit available just like you see here in this top, but we have 3 additional kits that also look fabulous in It's a Snap. So let's check those out. So our first kit I'd love to share with you is this gorgeous floral. And I love this. It just looks so beautiful. And it's got all these, it's almost like a painting. It's not necessarily a watercolor, but it looks like a painting. And this is going to be our focus fabric. And that'll go in this part here in our quilt. Just gorgeous. Now our background is this textural beige. I like the textural beiges with the florals like this because it kind of gives it keeps that organic feel, which I just love. That is going to go in the number 2 position here. Now our number 3 is a beautiful rose. Once again, another textural print. This rose pink goes so well with our rose flower here, and that is going to go in our number 3 position where the blue is here. Just love this one. It's very elegant, very, very refined. Just love it. All right, now we've got a great image on the screen so that you can see how beautiful the It's a Snap pattern is going to be made up in this fabric. So I think that it really does look different. It's amazing how just changing the fabric makes all the difference. So the kit information on this one is 8023132. It is called Splendid Bouquet. And once again, it's the It's a Snap pattern from our Pretty Darn Quick book. Now, I always say it's never too soon to sew for Christmas, which I truly believe. Love getting a jump on those. And I love this one because this fabric, it's a really nice kind of a geometric print. It's got this star on it that's kind of stylized, and the stars are metallic, which I love. So this gorgeous red is going to be our focus. It's going to go, of course, in our focus block. And then once again, we have our number 2, which is a really nice texture that's going to give us that resting spot for our eye. It will be in the background. And then our number 3 is just a duplicate of our focus. It's almost like a double focus here, but it's going to give us that nice pop for Christmas, our red, white, and green. And the number 3 goes everywhere the blue is here. So really love this one. As you can see from the image on the screen, it's very festive and it's just perfect for that nice throw at Christmas time, and would make a great gift because it's not just theme specific, but just a fun holiday one. So really, really like it. Our kit information on this one is 8022535. It is called Christmas Wonder. Pattern is It's a Snap from the Pretty Darn Quick book. This is really fun. I like this too because it's a totally different look. Now once again we have a floral, but it's a little bit more stylized floral. And I love how in this one we've put these 2 greens together. We've kind of got a little bit more of a blue green and a little bit more of a yellow green together. I love it whenever we do that, and it looks so good together. Okay, so let's talk about focus. Fun floral, lots of different colors that we can pick up in here. This will go in our big block here. And then, of course, our resting place is the nice cream. And all of these flowers have just a little bit of cream in it. Will go in the background. And then our number 3, also great with the cream. Nice pop of that lime green, which I love, but also coordinates so well with our jade. You can see right in here, these vines have this color in it. And then this fabric has the bright green in these flowers. So it's a perfect coordination. This is our number 3, goes everywhere the blue is. So very, very fun quilt. The image is on the screen so you can see how those great blues and greens and fun colors kind of blend together, give us that great cascading effect, and turns out to be a very, very charming quilt. So our kit information on this one, 8022600. It is called Precious Garden. The pattern, once again, is It's a Snap from the Pretty Darn Quick book. Now, those were 3 great kits that we saw. So if you like one of those, be sure to check them out on our website, fabriccafe.com, under the Kits tab. Now, don't forget, the pattern is also available in our Pretty Darn Quick book. So the It's a Snap pattern is in here. And don't forget, if you get 3 kits, you can have the book for free, which is a great thing. It's got 8 patterns in it, so be sure and check that out. Now, I have our backing here. It is already sewn together, ready to go. This is what we're going to be sending to the long arm quilter with our top, and I'll be sure and watch our Instagram and Facebook to get the final quilt. And if you need a little bit of extra tips on doing the backing, be sure to check out our backing video. We'll link it up here for you so that you can watch that as well. Now, if you liked this video and you want to see more like it, be sure to hit the like button. Put a comment in the comments below so that we can know that you loved this too. It was Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe. Thanks so much.